Welcome back to another weekly draft update. We did this last week and we called it Draft Update 1113 or whenever it got uploaded. So we'll call this Draft Update 1120. The point is we're going to start doing a lot more of these, especially after the national championship. And I was doing the math in my head. I think something like 260 players get drafted, and whatever the amount of weeks between the end of the college football season, the national championship, it happens a lot later than it used to. And then the actual NFL draft, it's something like we'd have to be doing 12 players a week, full breakdowns. And that's a lot of work. So we're going to try to get ahead of the curve here. And, these aren't going to be full breakdowns. These aren't going to be final verdicts. It's just going to be me talking about some of these players in this upcoming 26 draft. And not all of them will be the premier talent that we're talking about today. We're talking about, a guy that could be receiver one, Makai Lemon, a guy that could be cornerback one, Mansoor Delane, and then Malachi Fields having a pretty good season. Had a really good game for Notre Dame last week against Pitt in Pittsburgh. So we'll talk about those three guys today and just some housekeeping stuff before we get started. We're also now on Spotify. So when I started doing this YouTube, I just thought there wasn't great draft content out there on Spotify or on the podcast. We're not on. I'd love to come on here and say like all those other places. Oh, wherever you get podcasts. I don't know where the hell you get podcasts from. I know that Spotify is a pretty good platform, but YouTube's been pretty good. The point I'm trying to make is these are also going to be made. If you're in your car, if you're on a walk, you don't have to watch the video. We'll have the video aid if necessary if you want to watch that, and I think that'll add a good dimension to these videos. But throughout the course of the week, all three of these players, we did a bit more of an in-depth breakdown where we're looking at film. We're not going to even look at the film here. I'm just looking at a blank screen and just going to be talking about these players. So point I'm trying to make is these are compatible for your car. These are compatible for a workout, whatever you want to do. But in the meantime, you guys let me know what works. Let me know what you want to see in these, what you want to get out of this kind of content. And I'm very amenable to changing. This is a prototype. The reason I'm doing these right now is so when it's actually the draft time, we'll have a bit more of a finished product instead of, trying to put the fires out then. We'll put those fires out right now, but I'm going to start with Mansoor Delane. Any other housekeeping stuff? No, that's it. Mansoor Delane, great football player for LSU this season. Did not know who he was until this 2025 season, and he was a transfer from Virginia Tech. I don't know if he was a 3-year starter, but he didn't redshirt, so his true freshman season. Played a lot of football in Blacksburg, and been really good for LSU this season. Not just really good. There's people talking about him being a top 3 LSU cornerback of all time, which I think is crazy. Somebody in my YouTube comments said that, and that's not because I don't think Delane's a great football player. I just think, a one-and-done guy at LSU, I'm not sure you can really even put him in the conversation just on those grounds alone. If he played 2 seasons of lockdown football, different conversation. But what we're going to be talking about, Mansoor Delane right now. And yeah, so week 1, I was doing a DJ Pickett breakdown against Clemson. DJ Pickett, true freshman, played a great game against Clemson, but he was a bit more in that rotation. Him and PJ Woodland would rotate, and there was one guy that was playing every single snap, and it was number 5, Mansoor Delane. And I didn't really watch him that game, but in the back of my head, I was like, he's got a lot of trust from this LSU team. Corey Raymond, the defensive backs coach, he's got a lot of trust for the amount of snaps that he's playing. And you go back and watch the film. I think every now and then with a lot of these, lower power 4, these group of 5 transfers that transfer up, every now and then you'll see they're really technically refined and they just won't have the traits to be in the conversation for a first round in the NFL draft. So, I'm very big on you can get better at football throughout the course of your NFL career. You can't get more athletic, so if you don't have those traits, those athletic traits, a change of direction, if you're stiff in college, you're going to be stiff in the NFL. If you're slow in college, you're sure as hell going to be slow in the NFL. So I'm very big on we can live with some of the technical lapses at the college level if that athleticism is good enough. Delane checks the boxes in both of those regards. So technically refined, such a great athlete as well. It really jumps off of the tape. So just talking about those athletic traits that Mansoor Delane has, what we've been seeing this season at LSU. The change of direction is great. This dude plays a lot of man coverage. It's a lot of fun to watch. There's some other corners, in these cover 3 heavy schemes. You watch Zabian Brown at Alabama, who's a great football player, true sophomore, going to be a big name in the 2027 draft. He's not as fun to watch just because there's so much cover 3. There's so much of him with his ass to the sideline, backpedaling. Man, I just love the battle of wills that you watch in this man-to-man coverage, and especially with Mansoor Delane. He's a guy that's going to win a lot of these battles of wills, and I'm not really sure I've seen him lose all season. So what makes him such a good press man corner? He is so physical without being overly physical without getting flagged. I mean, it's honestly crazy the way that this dude will punch throughout the course of a wide receiver's route, and he never even gets close to a PI. You know, it's just so at the line without going over it. It's just very difficult to out physical Mansoor Delane without getting flagged for it. So I think he's very patient in man coverage, you know, and off man, he's very patient. He does a good job letting a receiver make the decision and then just lashing him in the mouth. You know, he just punches them at the top of their shoulder as soon as that receiver is trying to get to his mark. And first of all, Delane just knocks off the receiver off of his route. We saw this against Arkansas. They just played this week. And press man, you know, so physical throughout the entire route. The receiver pretty much gave up halfway through just because he knew he wasn't going to be getting open and man-to-man on Mansoor Delane. And Taylon Green, quarterback, threw it anyway, and Delane, of course, intercepted it. You know, just looking at the quarterback the entire time. I don't even think Delane was expecting the ball because, you know, he hasn't been thrown at, especially in man situations all season. So you realize how good of a man coverage cornerback Mansoor Delane was earlier in the season. You also notice how physical he was in run defense, which is, you know, very, very compelling to draft this guy because not just a guy that's going to play lockdown, he's also a guy that's going to help out in run defense. But how is he as a zone coverage cornerback? You know, we have the We-Draft website, we-draft.com. You know, I'm just going to plug it real quick. Point I'm making is a lot of people, this is one of those guys that a lot of people already got evaluations in. And the common theme was everybody was sold on the man coverage. Everybody could tell he was a pretty good zone coverage cornerback. Just wasn't as much of that on tape. You know, just this season at LSU, not going back to the Virginia Tech tape, but just not as much zone coverage on the highlight film this year. And I think this game against Arkansas, you know, it's up on the YouTube if you want to kind of do a deeper dive and take a look at it. It's also up on the X We Draft site. You know, I'm uploading all the film there without my narration, so you can kind of just break it down yourself. But the zone coverage looked really good this week. The explosiveness is what really jumped off this week, and you know, that's something that I didn't expect to see. Because in your head, you know, if you've seen a player play lockdown, you know, the hips are great, the physicality is great. You're kind of expecting them to have a deficiency in one aspect of the game. And you know, Delane, the obvious one is he's a bit undersized. I think we got him listed at something like 6 foot, 180, but he doesn't look small, so I'm not even going to harp on that. But you know, I was just not expecting this dude to crash downhill the way that he was. So when you're playing zone coverage, it's a lot more stuff happening in front of you, and you just have to come downhill and crash on it. And I mean, this dude's first step, the quick trigger that he has. There was one play in this Arkansas game where the cornerback Taylon Green, first it was cover 3, so I mean, you're not even really expecting that deep third. Mansoor Delane was a deep third defender. You weren't expecting him to come up and crash on a 5-yard, on a 7-yard dig route. You know, usually that's one that linebacker has to get underneath, but Delane's trigger just happens so fast. You know, he just has a hair trigger, he pulls the trigger, empties the clip on the wide receiver, gets knocked incomplete. And then about 2 quarters later, Delane was in zone again. I forget if it was cover 3, but the point is, I think he was actually a flat defender. Whatever it was, he sat on a hitch, and there's about 7 yards of cushion pre-snap. Wide receiver runs about a 3-yard hitch, and he just crashes on that. Taylon Green had, you know, it wasn't a pump fake. I think I got a football right here. It wasn't a pump fake. Taylon Green goes full on, about to throw it, and at the 11th hour, he was just smart enough to not test Mansoor Delane in zone coverage. I mean, Delane completely read it. It would have been a pick 6, no doubt. He was all over it. Honestly, he might have jumped it too fast that he wouldn't be able to get a pick 6 just because he got there too early. But, Taylon Green knew not to throw to him on that side. So, point I'm trying to make, this dude is good, is great in man. That's why you're drafting him. He's locked down in man schemes. He's going to play great man coverage. He can blitz, and he's not going to let his guy free. There's no doubt about that. And then, you know, this dude's just scheme versatile because of how good of a zone defender he is as well. You know, didn't talk about the eyes, but somebody said his eyes tend to drift. I don't know if I've seen that yet, but I tell you, at least athletically, that trigger that he has makes me want to draft him if I'm playing a lot of zone as well, because this dude's just great prospect. Not going to call him perfect. You know, I think if he was 6'2", 6'3", then we'd be talking about Mansoor Delane being the perfect prospect, but certainly a guy that's deserves to hear his name called in the early first round, in my opinion. But anything that would detract from him over the next 6 months, you know, just the normal red flag stuff, personality, and I haven't heard anything like that. So if anything like that happens, that's all I can really think about, because I think he's going to test very well in February at the combine, or whenever the combine happens. Then you just fall in love with him through his pro day, and then you draft him early in the first round. So that's my thoughts on Mansoor Delane. Move on to Makai Lemon now, another guy that I'm a big fan of. Let me get some coffee here. Oh my gosh. So the first guy we talked about was pretty dang good, Mansoor Delane. Next guy we're talking about is pretty dang good as well, Makai Lemon. Such a good football player. Another guy, kind of a similar player, honestly, when you think about it. Everything happens athletically. Everything happens football-wise really easily. The only, like, quote-unquote knock is going to be the size, but I'm not really worried about that with either guy. I mean, you look at both Mansoor Delane and Makai Lemon, you know, if you have to think that they're small only because you're looking at their listed weight and height on a spreadsheet and not what you're seeing on the film on a football field, you know, then the games aren't played on spreadsheets. They're not played in the combine in Indianapolis. You know, they're played on a football field, and they both look big enough in football context. There's a lot of good football players that get drafted early, that deserve to get drafted early, you know, that don't look big, and that you do worry about them staying healthy long term. I don't really see that with either Delane or Makai Lemon, but Makai Lemon, man, this dude plays a lot bigger than he is, and I'm gonna stop talking about Mansoor Delane. Makai Lemon plays a lot bigger than he is, so I think the knocks that happen with wide receivers a lot of times, if they're undersized, it's not only can they handle, you know, getting injured, can they handle the hits at the next level. I'm not worried about that with Makai Lemon for sure, but that's kind of the knocks that happen. The other knock is he a big target, right? Things are a bit more difficult to throw to Malachi Tony because he's 5'11", regardless of how much separation he creates. There's been some throws where he's wide open, and you know, Carson Beck just misses him because of how small Malachi Tony is. And, you know, that's nothing he can control. He's still probably one of the best. He is one of the best receivers in the country, one of the best true freshman wide receivers you're going to see. But the trade-off is, you know, you kind of have to be a bit more accurate. I think Makai Lemon is a lot bigger of a football player than he's listed because of the way that he attacks the ball consistently. There's one throw. This dude is so good in all. I call it 4 phases of being a wide receiver. First, it's getting open. Second is catching the ball, you know, at the catch point, and then after the catch. And then the 4th phase is kind of that ability to stretch the field. And, I mean, Makai Lemon does all that very well. The route running is so easy. That's honestly why he's a first-rounder. How aggressive the breaks happen. This dude's release is so clean. The explosiveness, it doesn't take a long time for him to get going. Those first 3 yards are so fast. This dude would have a really good 10-yard split. He's going to have a really good 40 time. Separates underneath very well. At the catch, he's great. I mean, the ball tracking is one of the best, I think, that we'll talk about in this 26 class. Attacks the ball consistently. You know, the body contortion, he's great at the catch. And then after the catch, we didn't see that this week against whoever they played. Some Big Ten team. Northwestern. Whoever they played. Didn't really see him with the ball in his hands as much, but, you know, I think earlier in the season, we did a mid-season breakdown on Makai Lemon. You saw that then for sure. So, really good in that regard. You know, a guy that you get the ball in his hands and going to do something with it. And then after the catch, we talked about that. He's got the ability to stretch the field also. So, the 40 time is really good. The explosiveness is really good. That's going to help him, you know, separate early. And then sometimes with these smaller wide receivers, they get open downfield. They're not great at finding the ball. You know, that's why you kind of like those big field stretchers. 6'6" receiver for Rutgers, KJ Duff, massive target, and he can stretch the field. Very easy to hit him downfield on those low percentage throws because of how big of a target he is. Makai Lemon, you know, is not 6'6", but the ball tracking, he might as well be 6'6". The way that this guy can just completely change angles, it looks like a center fielder, you know. Center fielders, the first step is back, and then they can change their angle based on the ball. You see Makai Lemon do that, except his body, you know, obviously if you're running a post, you're not facing the ball the way that you are if you're a center fielder. The way this dude can just run a 45-degree angle and then all of a sudden realize the ball's that way and then change it to a 60-degree angle, it's amazing. And it's not just the athleticism, it's that understanding, that sixth sense or whatever, and then the athleticism takes over because on this one play, whoever they played this week, did a great job adjusting that angle and then completely changing his body contortion and just contorting and, you know, diving and making a Superman grab, just diving head first almost and brought it in downfield. So this dude can stretch the field. You know, honestly, I think if you just had this guy run 3 or 4 posts a game, get open downfield and bring these in, he'd be worth a 3rd-round pick. But the fact that he can do that, the fact that he can separate underneath the way that he can, the way that he can get the ball in his hands and make something happen. I think there's a lot of things working to draft Makai Lemon, and honestly, I think this guy's worth an early first rounder as well. Still got to watch Carnell Tate. I don't know if I'm ready to say Makai Lemon's wide receiver 1 in this 26 class. Other big names as well. Other intriguing names in this 26 class in the wide receiver room as well. But I think Makai Lemon's one of those guys that will definitely not only talk about being a first rounder, but be excited about him being a first rounder. Sometimes these wide receivers that go in round 1 just can't really get all jacked up about them, contributing from day 1. Makai Lemon's one of those guys that's going to contribute from day 1, and I think has the potential to make a difference from day 1, depending on the system and all that kind of stuff. But I'm really excited about him. He's having a great season at USC. Going to be a good football player. He's a good football player now, going to be a good football player at the next level for sure. And we're going to wrap up with Malachi Fields here. Oh my gosh. In the meantime, you guys let me know if there's any other players you want me to get up. We're going to get it. When I tell you we're going to get every single player up that you're going to want to talk about, as long as I can find the film. Once the national championship happens on, a Monday usually, that Tuesday we're going to upload 3 or 4, draft evaluations. I just want to wait to go crazy until after the national championship happens. But feel free to reach out. Any guys that are should be on my radar. We got some under the radar guys. Red Murdoch for Buffalo, one of those guys I'm pretty excited about. But feel free to reach out. Any recommendations? We did Jacob Rodriguez last week. Yeah, Malachi Fields now, he's not the same level as Makai Lemon, there's no doubt to me. So he's a 6'4", 220-pound wide receiver. Notre Dame played Pitt this week. He had a great game. He finished with 2 touchdowns, 99 yards. And there was 2 plays where C.J. Carr had a free play, and he did a great job just taking a shot to Malachi Fields. And Fields, this dude's best trait is him attacking the ball, him when you're throwing the ball to him, because he can not only be 6'4" and bring in those 6'4", those 50-50 balls. He brings in a lot more than that, because if there's one-handed catch that he had this week against Pitt, that I don't know, I'm not on social media the way other people are, but I'm sure if you're on social media, you've seen it a lot. I'm sure if you watch ESPN, you've seen it on there. They might have even played it on CNN. That's how good of a catch it was. But that was earlier in the game, and then later in the game, the touchdown, similar play, free play, and C.J. Carr just took a shot to his 6'4", 220-pound wide receiver, and he brought it in. That was more of a conventional 6'4", catch. So on the ball skills alone, this dude's going to be a day 2 prospect, I'd imagine. The reason why I'm a bit more hesitant on him is just because it's how does he separate at the next level? He's pretty fast in a straight line. I just detect some stiffness, some trouble changing direction, and you can kind of see it on those comeback routes, those in routes. A lot of these 6'4" guys, you'll ask them to run in a straight line, and then just to switch things up every now and then, you'll just have them run a 5-yard hitch. So I think this is a guy where the combine does matter. Makai Lemon, Mansoor Delane, they're going to test well. Not really worried about that. I think both of those guys have a day 1 floor, I'd imagine, barring something unforeseen. With Malachi Fields, I could see this guy going in a variety of places. I just don't think in the first round right now. But, if he shows up and you don't worry about the stiffness after watching him at the combine, then I could understand, start talking about him being a first rounder. Anyways, Malachi Fields, I don't even know if I really gave the spiel. 6'4", 220 wide receiver for Notre Dame, Virginia transfer. This is his first year at Notre Dame, and he played a good game this week. Yeah. 6'4", 220. What I get excited about him, and we didn't see this week against Pitt, but 6'4", 220. I want to talk about the 220. That is a massive wide receiver on the boundary. A lot of corners, they get drafted very early. I mean, remember Manny Forbes was 160, and he got drafted in the first round. If you got a corner on the outside that, a lot of times you're going to trade off that size for athleticism. If you got an undersized corner, that's going to be a very difficult dude to bring down consistently. 6'4", 220, that's a bit almost a tight end build. I mean, you look at Kenyon Sadiq, that dude's a pretty small tight end. Malachi Fields is just a little smaller than him. It's going to be very difficult for these boundary corners to consistently bring down, I think. And I think that's what you're going to justify drafting Malachi Fields with. I'm trying to think. So I like the way we did Delane. I like the way we did Lemon. Going to work on the way that we do Fields going forward. But you guys let me know what you think about these shows. Anything else that you want to recommend how we should go about it, feel free to reach out. I think we got like 3 likes on the last one, so we're going to aim for 4 this time. But yeah, feel free to reach out. Thanks for watching.